Hello, welcome back to the Knight, of course. In this chapter, we're going to look at the second move sidelines, the last chapter remaining. If you look at the course from start to finish, after e4, c5, we had looked, of course, at the move knight f3 in great detail, where we looked at the open Sicilian, but also at the third move sidelines with bishop b5 check, bishop c4, all sorts of things under third move sidelines there as well. We also looked at a second move, knight c3, a very serious move. White might still transpose into the open Sicilian after d6, but he could also play d4, which we looked at in a separate chapter, the Grand Prix attack with f4, and the closed Sicilian setups with g3 or knight g2 first. And finally, we looked at the Alapin, which is the second move c3, very popular second move sideline. But there are a few minor moves here on move 2, a few lesser popular moves that are still quite dangerous and that still come up time and again in games with fast time control, but also in club practice and amateur practice. There are many amateurs and club players who are always looking forward to surprise their opponent as early as move 2 as well. So we should definitely take a look at all that. So let's just jump straight into it. Some of the second move sidelines, I have to say, they definitely make some sense, and it is important to definitely be aware of at least the first few moves and to know how to handle them. One such is move 2f4. Let's start with that. White wants to play some sort of a Grand Prix attack without committing himself to the move knight c3, but this has one fundamental drawback, and that is the move d5. We have this very strong push. Now e5 is actually played a lot, but it is so terrible. It's played, of course, mostly on by lesser experienced players. Here, after knight c6, knight f3, bishop g4, we have harmonious development, complete control over the center, and just a beautiful version of the French Caro-Kann and all of these openings combined. We've got the bishop out, the control over the center, and after bishop e2, e6, castle, we bring the knights to f5 with knight g7, c3, knight f5, knight f3, bishop e7, knight c2. White's trying to get a d4, but it doesn't really matter. After h5, we have solved all our openings problems, and I'm just doing very well. e5, not a move. d3, not dangerous. You can take on e4, d takes e4, trade queens and enter an endgame. We can also play knight c6. When after bishop e2, we transpose to line, we'll check later. The second move, bishop e2. Bishop b5 check, however, is a decent way of playing. This is a relatively new variation. It's been played by a strong and talented youngster from Uzbekistan, Abdusatorov, a couple of times online. After bishop d7, white trades bishops, bishop d7, queen d7, and now wants to play d3. The endgame after takes is roughly equal, but definitely playable for white, could even be slightly more comfortable for white. So instead, I recommend to stick to the middle game. We play knight c6, knight f3, and here we play e6. If white castles short, we have a very harmonious setup that we'll also see later in other lines. Bishop d6, followed by, after let's say, knight g7, c3, and then castle. And we might push for f5 here as well. We have just a very harmonious development. The knight is nicely hidden on e7, and white doesn't quite have the dangerous pawn pushes. After e5, we go bishop c7, and we'll undermine the e5 pawn with f6 eventually. Very comfortable. Abdusatorov played 7 queen e2, slightly more clever. Now bishop d6 is not possible, of course, because of e5. But here we can use the fact that the queen is a target there by taking on e4 after d4, knight d4. Also, direct knight d4 is perfectly fine, by the way. Okay, take knight d4. If white takes after c d4, we'll have some pressure against the c pawn. Bishop will come out to c5 if needed, knight e7, and a very comfortable development. So queen d3 is more critical. I play knight f6, knight d2, for example, rook d8. It's a good move, keeping the bishop flexible in case white takes on d4. We might want to develop the bishop to c5 in one go. And after c3, we take on f3, queen f3, and bishop e7, castle, and black's doing very fine here. e5 is always met by knight d5, and we want to expand a little bit on the queen side with b5 and then c4. Comfortable position for black. This knight d4 idea is definitely good to know. The main line is 3, it takes d5. Here we play knight f6, after queen d5, white gets knight c3 tempo, so knight f6 is a lot more clever. Knight c3 now can be met by knight d5. There is no challenge in that. Knight d5, queen f3. Here we can keep the queens, queen e6 check. The f4 pawn looks in general very ugly in these structures. It does us no damage without its colleague on e4. With e4 pawn next, they look nicely connected and threatening. But once the e4 pawn leaves, f4 pawn looks quite lonely. 4c4 is not very good. It's better for white to give a check on b5 first, as we'll see. Now we can just play e6. We sacrifice the pawn, d bishop e6. We don't really mind. White has weakened the d4 square with pawn on c4. Also, f4 pawn is very weak. All the central squares are weak. Black's doing very well. So knight f3, knight c6, for example. Bishop e2, we can play bishop d6. Hit the f4 pawn already. d3, queen c7. Again, hit the pawn after g3. We go long castle, followed by after short castle rook h8. And our rooks are tremendous. Everything's great. Next, we want to play queen d7, bishop c7, and bishop to g4. Apply even more pressure on the d3 pawn, and just very good position for black here. White definitely regrets having grabbed the pawn. For bishop d5 check is the main move, and it makes sense. After bishop d7, white trades the bishop. Bishop d7, queen d7, and now plays c4. He's gotten rid of this passive light square bishop. Now we play e6. We want to open the position. After d takes e6, queen e6. Queen e2, we trade the queens, queen takes e2, knight e2, and knight c6. In the endgame, white's d3 and d4 squares are tremendously weakened, and the fact that he has extra pawn is not too relevant. After castle on castle, we'll bring the knight to d3, and sooner or later, white will have to abandon the d2 pawn, and we'll win it back. 7 queen e2 is the main move. Now we play bishop d6, activating the bishop, and after d3, here it's all the same. White can take the fe first or play knight f3 first. It's all transposes to the same thing. d3, we castle. d fe, knight f3. Knight c6. Yeah, this position basically arises one way or the other. Now white can castle. Now rook a8, knight c3. Rook a8, obviously bringing the second rook, pushing for e5 next. Knight c3, e5, and now white's idea is to go f5. He's hoping that our bishop is passive, but the bishop will have quite some future, as you will see later on, by c7 and a5. And here we can take back on the 5, but it's much more clever to first play knight d4. White has to draw back the queen. And now we can play h6, stopping both knight g5 and bishop g5. The f5 pawn is not running away anywhere. Move like knight h4 is met by e4, opening up the whole position. The f5 pawn remains very weak. And after knight e4, move 15, we take with the knight on f5. And now after queen e2, I like to play bishop. I like this move, bishop c7. Very strong idea. After bishop d2, we can take knight e4, queen e4, and knight d6. After queen d5, we can play queen e6. c5 pawn is not hanging because of bishop b6. And after queen e6, rook e6, we have broken through the blockade on e4 square, and we'll push with e4 and activate our pieces when black is slightly better. And after 17b3, we can play bishop a5. Very strong move. After bishop d2, knight d4. If white takes on d4, after ed, we'll have control over the e-file, as the bishop on a5 controls these crucial e1 and d2 squares. So, yeah, f4 d5 certainly very fine for black. But you have to know this move at d5, punishing white for postponing knight c3. We have so many moves, by the way. Another move is 2d3, but yeah, white's going for the King-Indian setup, but after knight c6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7 will transpose the position we see under second move g3. It makes sense, this move order for white, because second move g3 allows option of d5. So this move order makes some sense, but yeah, we'll see that. By the way, also knight c3 move here will transpose to the close Sicilian with knight c3. Separate chapter. c4. c4. Yeah, white can play that. It's basically a variation on this English opening c4, c5, knight c3, knight c6, and then the so-called Botvinnik system with g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, and then e4. This setup is possible. Usually white plays it via first move c4. If he tries to get it here after e4, c5, c4, there is even a small flaw with this after knight c6, knight c3, g6, g3, bishop g7, bishop g2. Now we can postpone the move d6. We can start with a6, After knight e2, play rook b8. Now we want to push b5 already, grab some space. After castle b5, d3, d6, we already grab some space. After f4, it's just important not to allow knight f6, e5, losing a piece. But play more accurate, b5, knight d5, for example, bishop g4. So before knight d5, bishop g4, we want to get full control over the d4 square and keep the knight with e6. Develop the other knight to e7. And after 7 move a4, we can here, we have a lot of options, but we can play here e5, castle, knight g7, and after d3, d6, or castle first, or bishop e3, d6, we have a symmetrical position essentially, but it is white who has an extra weakness on the b4 square, whereas our b5 square is guarded by the pawn. So I believe, if anything, this position is more comfortable for black. And yeah, that is to do with the fact, I will explain it once again a little bit better. Here, after c4, c5, knight c3, knight c6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, white can also start with d3, and after d6 only now play e4, while after early e4 we have this a6 rook b8 plan. So we have saved a tempo on the move d6, and we made this a6 rook b8 our priority. And now, yeah, we get either b5 or white weakens the b4 square. So 2c4 is not even accurate, even if he wants to get this rather harmless Botvinnik system. 2 bishop c4, it happens a lot amongst amateurs. Whenever I played in some casual games with amateurs or some exhibitions, I saw this happen really a lot. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that some amateurs are trying to go for scholar's mate, and they are aware also of e4, e5, and that they can put the bishop on c4. But here, this usually ends up badly for them. It's much better if you want to put the bishop to c4. Much better is to start with knight f3, d6, and then go bishop c4, which is covered in third move sidelines chapter. That's certainly playable. But here we don't have to go for the neither pawn structure with d6. We should go for e6. We should try to isolate this bishop with e6, d5 in one go. I look at few moves, queen e2. Yeah, the pin is not going to last long. After knight c6, c3, we can play bishop c7, unpin, and then we go d5 next. Knight f3, knight c6, castle, knight f6. Against rook e1 or knight c3, we have knight takes e4 and a d5 trick, simplifying the position. And against d3, we can push with d5, ed, bishop e5, bishop e7. And yeah, white spent a lot of tempo with his bishop, and we have good central control here. And after 3 knight c3, we play a6. This is also nice to get a6. Many amateurs allow b5, but if they don't, it's nice that we have taken away the square after, for example, knight c6, knight f3, knight f6, d3, d5. The bishop now doesn't have even the b5 square. And after, for example, say bishop b3, the bishop is staring at this d5 pawn, bishop e7, castle, castle, followed by h6, bishop e6. Yeah, this is a typical setup by someone who is not very experienced in chess. Bishop c4 move 2 is really not very good. And again, we abandon our d6 setup and go for e6 instead, just to punish them. 2b3, interesting setup. I was always told to go g6, bishop b2, knight f6, which is the standard way to go. But then after knight c3, bishop g7, knight d5, white has a pretty decent position, actually, it turned out. So instead, I recommend the move d6. I think it's even more ambitious. After bishop b2, we play knight f6. White starts with knight c3 or with bishop b5 check. If you start with bishop b5 check, we can play bishop d7. Also, knight b7 is very fine after knight b7. For example, knight c3, a6, bishop d7, bishop d7. We have the bishop pair, and yeah, we are doing quite fine here. Bishop on b2 is a little odd, of course. Bishop d7 though is fine. Bishop d7, queen d7, d3. Bishop f6, gf is never a problem. White has weakened his queenside pawn structure with pawn on b3, c2, a2. Yeah, bishop from b2 is clearly missing. And if something in the long run, you can always play f5 and double these pawns. You don't have to worry about that. If d3, we play knight c6. F4, we play g6. Again, taking on f6 would lead to a bunch of weak squares here, weak dark squares around the queenside. And if knight f3, we can play bishop g7. Also bishop h6 is, by the way, an idea always. bishop g7, castle, castle. Black has a good position, and already we are hoping for a cheapo, knight bd2, knight takes e4, and this, yeah, bishops are not entirely equal. One on g7 is protected by the king, and the other one is not. So if white takes the knight, we take the bishop, and if white takes the bishop, we take the knight. And after bishop f8, knight takes f1 is there. So yeah, this essentially wins material. Some people have failed for this cheapo, by the way. So fell for it, sorry. In general, one thing I noticed, I wrote about it a long time ago in one of my annotations in the New in Chess magazine a long time ago. In general, these X-rays with the bishops, bishop on g7 and bishop on b2, it's very often to black's advantage, exactly because the bishop on g7 is guarded by the king, and this other one is not guarded by anything, and that creates all these tactical motifs. That's for bishop b5 check. Move 4, knight c3 is there, then we play knight c6. Now white can play f4, and then we go g6. Usually he anyway goes bishop b5, so let's look at bishop b5 first. Bishop d7, f4. If white plays move like knight e2, we can play a6, grab the bishop pair, take, and we're hitting the e4 pawn already. And if white develops with d3, defends with d3, we develop with e6, bishop 7. Very comfortable having the bishop pair. Bishop on b2 again is a little bit odd. It's not bad as such, but it's a bit odd. And it took white 2 moves to place it there, so I'm not sure it's so great. If white loves this bishop on b2 in general, if he loves these setups, I recommend second move knight c3, d6, and d4. There is a separate chapter for that. There, bishop comes to b2 in a much better version. But again, let's continue. 6 f4, now we go g6. We can also go e6, bishop e7, nothing wrong with that. But I like g6. Here, knight d5 is not that good. We go bishop g7, knight f6, bishop f6, bishop f6, ef. And we will always be able to push f5 if needed. For example, knight f3, a6, bishop c4. If white takes, we take back, and then after queen d7, eventually we'll push f5 anyway. And after bishop c4, we castle, play f5. Now the f4 pawn, as you know, will always be a little bit isolated. Without the e4 pawn, it will feel a little bit out of place. It's not literally isolated because there is the g pawn, but it is definitely lonely. And if d3, we play queen f6, putting pressure on the f4 pawn. After queen d2, knight d4, we want to trade knights, play bishop c6. And yeah, we have just a very, very comfortable position. A7, knight f3 is also there. Then we play bishop g7. Queen d2, there is a move knight d4, which is very unpleasant to face, hitting the queen, and knight d4, c d4. Knight is also being attacked. If 8 d3, now we have, we can just develop, of course, with castle, but I really like the ambitious move knight h5. And after queen d2, castle, we have this resource bishop h6. And now g3 is met by bishop h3. Rook of knight d4. Suddenly, bishop on b5 is feeling somewhat abandoned. And outside this pawn chain, it's about to get trapped. And if 11 knight e2, we can hit him with e5. And white's already facing some unpleasant issues due to this pin. So yeah, the b3, we just go d6, knight f6. Not a great move. 2 knight e2 does not have an independent value, but it is tricky. We should not play d6. I played d6 once here pretty much automatically, and after g3 I landed in serious trouble. I also continued playing not too accurately, and I allowed white to play bishop g2. I went something like knight c6 or g6, and basically then white got c3 d4, and he got a serious advantage very quickly. So after knight e2, we have to know just one important move, knight f6 first. e5 is now not possible because of knight g4. The knight is blocking the queen. And as long as you know that knight f6 is good, he has to play knight bc3. But now we play d6, and then c3, d4 is out of the equation, and g3 will transpose to the chapter about the closed Sicilian. So knight e2, knight f6 is an important move. And a decent trap, by the way, by white. White can play it. Knight e2, knight 6, he can play knight c3, d6, and go back to d4. The only thing he allows is the move d5 here, which I believe equalizes quite efficiently as well. So that's the only downside. Second move g3, this is sensible. White wants to play the closed Sicilian without committing the knight to c3. And now there are two options. I always knew that d5 has to be played, but turns out knight c6 is also possible. Maybe it's easier. Maybe it's even easier. But d5 is very good. ed queen d5 now, a common idea. We also seen that. We have seen that in the third move alternatives chapter. We grab the diagonal before white gets the bishop, the long diagonal, and after knight f3. I knew always that you have to play bishop g4, bishop g2, queen e6 check, king f1, and now knight c6. And after, let's say, h3, bishop to h5, d3 or knight c3, we play queen d7, followed by e6, knight f6, and so on, and that's fine. But it turned out that also very good is simple move knight c6. And actually now, if bishop g2, queen e6 is even stronger. King f1, simply g6. No need to develop the bishop to g4. We just want to play bishop g7, knight f6, and then queen comes to d7, and bishop can come to b7. Queen comes to d7, of course, only if necessary. Yeah, so bishop g2 is not good. d3 is at least a funny perpetual. Knight d4, bishop g2, bishop h3. And trading these bishops is good for black, but if bishop h3, then we have a perpetual. Knight f3, king f1, knight d2, king g1, knight f3, king f1. Actually, it happened over 20 times, a very random move repetition. And if 5 knight c3, we play queen e6. Bishop e2 is met by knight d4. We want to grab the bishop and then develop our bishop to long diagonal. If white takes on d4, c d4, knight b5, we have strong move queen c6, annoying white on the long diagonal once again. And after f3, we can play queen b6. White cannot castle yet because of d3, and next we want to develop with knight f6 and e5. Black is already better. And if 6 queen e2, the endgames are around even. We take bishop e2, e5, d3, for example, f6. We have a bit more space, but without queens, white shouldn't be doing so badly either. As you know, when facing this space advantage, the side without the space advantage wants to trade pieces, and especially without queens, usually these positions are roughly balanced. But that said, black is very comfortable, of course. So I think that's very easy, actually, this knight c6, d5 and knight c6. But let's look also at knight c6, also because it can arise from 2 d3. Bishop g2, now g6. Now let's look at d3. This could arise after 2 d3, as I mentioned. Here we go, bishop g7. After f4, we can play, of course, anything we want. Like, let's say, d6, knight f3. For example, b5. Castle b8, grabbing some space on the queen side, and later developing the knight. As in a closed Sicilian, as I already mentioned, these pawn advances are not as dangerous as they appear. It doesn't bring white very much, so we can definitely play this. But I like to take white completely out of its concept with the move d5. Very original move. It's just, I'm showing it just sort of for fun. It could be very useful for you. If you play a guy who always plays, for example, something like this, then you can just take him out completely of his setup with d5. And if e d5, which is the only critical move, then knight b4. We want to win back the pawn after... for example, knight f3, we take it back, castle, and now knight h6 to f5, or knight f6 as well. Of course, we have this position where white has lost his pawn structure fluidity, and the pawn on f4 looks a little bit odd. This is around equal. Instead, 7c4 is critical. Now we play bishop f5, hit the d3 pawn, bishop e4. The only sensible way to protect it, queen a5. Setting up an unexpected x-ray. Now there are two options. King f1 was played in a game between Krzysztofiak and Krzyzewski, Polish Championship 2010, first league. Very surprising that this random sequence of moves happened actually in a game. Here black played e6, and black's doing very well. You should note that a3 doesn't threaten ab because the rook is hanging here, so black's doing very fine here. Knight c3 is more critical, move 9, and now there is a very forced sequence: bishop c3, bc, knight takes d3, strong combination, queen d3, bishop e4, and after queen e4 we have queen takes d3 check. White can continue with king f2, queen a1, queen c2. He has compensation for the exchange, bishop b2 is incoming. Now the easiest solution is to play queen d4 check, king g2. White should keep bishop b2 as an option, so not go bishop e3, after which we just drop the queen back to f6. king g2. Now we have knight f6, so we allow white to win back material with bishop b2, queen e4. That's the whole point. We sacrifice the rook, queen e4, knight e4, bishop h8, and now we are piece down. We trap the bishop with f6, and we will either win back the bishop or a lot of pawns. Critical line is bishop g7, knight d6, g4, stopping knight f5. We take the pawn on c4, knight e2. We go for the other pawn with rook d8, rook c1. Now we go for b5, protecting the knight. The line continues with knight c3, knight d6, king f3, and now a strong move h5. And after g8, gh, the bishop remains kind of trapped. So that's the idea. Interesting stuff, very unusual stuff, but yeah, just the extra option, this d5 move against this obscure setup. And if white plays here 492, trying to get c3, d4, now we have still our pawn on d7 and we are flexible, so we go bishop g7. And after c3, we can always play the move e5, which is very, very important. After castle, we play d6, c3, and now e5. We don't allow him to push d4. And here black is very fine. For example, if d3, knight e7, well, if here f4, then well, castle bishop e3 will transpose. So bishop e3 first, castle f4. Now we can, for example, take with ef. If gf, we can we can play f5, or first go bishop g4, provoke h3, and then drop the bishop back, and then push f5. And or sorry, to in fact, could also drop it back to some other square, let's say e6. And if knight takes f4, we go b5, we go for b4 and have counterplay against the c3 pawn. We have this knight on e5 potentially. White just doesn't have much fluidity in this pawn structure, so we're doing very well. If d4, move 9, now we can go e d4 with c4, and now a very strong idea. Bishop g4, simple d5 also equalized like this, bishop g4, provoke f3. Now we drop back to c8, spend 2 tempi on provoking this ugly move f3. And the idea is that after knight bc3, we have d5, and now it works marvelously. And if we trade this pawns in the center, then the bishop on f3, bishop on g2 and pawn on f3, are a very ugly combination for white. And if white tries to push d4 with knight a3, knight c2, so we go knight g7, knight c2, then we can push d5 first. After ed, knight d5, white gets his d4, but that's already symmetry. After ed or cd or ed, both knight d4, we can castle. Knight cd4 is the same, we also castle. And yeah, this is of course a complete symmetry, and black is very fine. So after g3, I just wanted to make a point that we don't have to go for d5. We can also play knight c6 and g6, and this knight e2, c3 business is just not working because of this e5 idea. 2b4, yeah, is not a good gambit, but sometimes it pops up. We just take a pawn after cb, and now after next we want to push d5. So after d4, we push d5. e5, that's great for black. Knight c6, a3, now queen a5 is very strong, not allowing ab. Knight f3, bishop f5, followed by e6. b3 is currently a threat, by the way, but if white defends from it, we go e6, so we have developed our bishop outside the pawn chain and have an extra pawn as well. e5 is strange. ed5 is, but there are actually a lot of games, I think, by amateurs who are not so experienced, but it's not very good. ed5, we can play knight f6, we can also take with the queen, but knight f6 is good. a3, now again we can take both with the knights and the queen. Knight d5, ab, e5 is quite cool, but easiest is queen d5. Now ab is met by e5. Very unfortunate for white, uncomfortable to face as well. Knight f3 instead. Here we can play e6. We can also develop the bishop first, bishop g4, bishop e2, e6, castle, knight c6, ab, bishop b4, and if h3 we play bishop h5. If c3 we play bishop e7. If c4 we play queen to d7, for example. And there's just no real compensation for the pawn. The main move before cb, I would guess, is a3, and now we have again d5 before white gets knight c3. After ed, queen d5, there is a queen e5 check threat. There is no knight c3 move. And after knight f3, easiest is to just play e6 and then develop with the knights and have an extra pawn. But e5 also works. And now I looked at some options. AB, bishop before c3. Now we can play e4, cb, ef. Queen f3 takes, knight e7. Queen side, the whole pawn structure is ruined for white on both king side and the queen side. And c bishop b2, we can play knight c6, defend the pawn. c4 and queen d6 is a bit easier. Theory goes queen 6, then bishop d3 is tricky. Queen d6 is easiest. After AB, queen b4, white can regain the pawn, but now we have bishop pair, knight e5, knight e5, knight f6, knight 3, bishop d6, knight f3, castle, bishop e2, bishop 6. We have bishop pair, good development, and we were threatening currently to win the c4 pawn as well. White can, of course, try to play something like castle, bishop c4, and then rook b1, and try to regain the pawn, and then we'll have the outside passer with small advantage. Just easy money here, basically. Now let's look at the sixth move, c4. After c4, we can just play queen d8, the simplest, and after bishop b2, e4, and knight e5, just develop with knight f6 first. We can take on a3, of course, and after knight a3, play knight f6, bishop e2, bishop e7, castle, castle, and we completed our development and just have an extra pawn without much compensation. And again, 5e6 was also very, very easy. I think the only thing you should really be aware of after d4 is that you should take on b4 and then play d5 next after d4 or after a3. And the rest should be easy. Next up is the move a3. It's a move. It's not a bad move as such, but it's also not so great. It's been played against me by the chess celebrity Gotham Chess, but yeah, it's not a good move. It happens. It happens. We here play the move g6. The dragon here is particularly good. If white goes for the open Sicilian with knight f3, bishop g7, d4, after cd knight d4, we managed to play without the move d6, and after knight f6, knight c3. Now e5 is met by queen a5 check, and after knight c3, castle. We already want to push d5. So after bishop e3, there will be already d5. So white is not in time to go for the for this English attack type setup. And after knight b3, we have many different plans. We can play b6, bishop b7, or d6, knight 6, bishop e6, d6, knight 6, bishop e6, and d5 as well. Just a very comfortable position for black here. It is actually a reversed English opening, which is in its turn called the reverse dragon. So yeah, but no matter how much you reverse it, it's always good for us. If white goes for 3 bishop c4, that's how some people try and justify this a3 move. It doesn't make much sense. We go bishop g7, and now h4 played. Was played quite a bit in the blitz games, but it's not very good. It's been played by Nepo against Nilfant in an online rapid event, but here there's very strong reply, knight f6. The point is that after e5, knight g8, the e5 pawn is hanging. We are not only threatening to take it with the bishop, also knight c6 will hit it, and if white plays f4, then this a lot of these squares will be weakened, and then we'll break the pawn chain with d6. Black is doing very well. If white tries to protect the pawn with knight c3, we just go knight c6, and now if he wants to make sense of the h pawn, you can go for the sack with h5, knight h5, rook h5, but it's really, really bad version here for white. We just take on h5, queen h5, and now the best is to go knight e5, both defending the f7 pawn and attacking the c4 bishop, and after bishop a2, we can play simply d6, f4, now can be met by bishop g4, and queen h4, there's bishop f6, queen g3, e6, threatening bishop h4. So all this doesn't work for white, not even close. And if white tries to make sense of a3 by playing b4 on move 3, we can play bishop g7, knight c3, d6. Now it's not clear what white has achieved. After, for example, knight f3 and f6, we played the normal dragon setup, and not clear what a3 before has brought white. So this is a very comfortable position for black. And if 5 g3, we can just play knight c6. b5 is met by knight d4. The knight is sitting very well here on d4, as the c3 knight is taking away square from the pawn. And rook b1, here black is comfortable in many different ways. b6, bishop b7 is the simplest, but I really like concrete approach with cb, ab, bishop c3. hasn't been played before, but it's really strong. After DC, we will develop with knight f6, and now after bishop g2, the c4 square is tremendously weakened. After castle knight e2, we have another strong idea with a5, creating a passed pawn. If white takes, then he's left with this sad doubled pawns, and if castle, we will push the pawn forward to a4, and we will sit on the c4 square either with the bishop after bishop e6, bishop c4, or with the knight after knight e5, knight c4 as well. So very good position for black here. a3 doesn't make much sense. Move knight a3, the next one in line. The main advantage of this move is that it is not as bad as it looks. It looks horrible, but it's actually not that bad. White is not worse here just yet. I looked at two things here. The simplest is to play d6, just intending our usual Najdorf setup. Here white's point is to go c3, knight f6, and now g3. Knight e4, queen a4 check is a trick we know from third move sidelines. We're not falling for it. We just play knight c6. Now white goes bishop g2. White is trying to get the pawn center with d4, so this makes some sense for sure. But we have a strong response. We go e5, and after knight e2, we hit him in the center with d5, and white takes, knight takes, castle. Now white prepares d4. The most accurate is to provoke the move h3, bishop g4, h3. Now go bishop e6 back. And now after d4, we take e4, c4, bishop e7, and black is very fine. We want to castle next. And perhaps the only nuance we should know is that if white takes dc bishop c5, knight d5 castle, and knight b2 d4, we can allow a trade on e6 to happen as the f2 pawn is rather weak. We can play queen b6, and after knight e6, f6. White has some serious issues with his f2 pawn, and after knight f4, which is the only sensible way to guard it, we can simply simplify everything with knight f2, bishop f2. Knight f4, sorry, bishop f4, and now bishop f2. And after rook f2, e5, we will win the bishop back on the pin, and the position is totally simplified. Black can also, of course, play more ambitious, more complex chess, and I really like the move knight c6 here in particular. Now white plays bishop b5, which is a strange Rossolimo. Rossolimo is a system that rises after moves e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, and here bishop b5, the so-called Rossolimo. And there it is as though white has played the move knight a3 instead of the move knight f3, which is obviously far less topical, far less universal. Yeah, here black has many ways. e6 is comfortable. There are also lots of different moves, but g6 is quite good. And it was played by Boris Gelfand, who managed to win a very good game against Jan Nepomniachtchi in a rapid tournament. Jan played knight f3. If white takes on c6 and after bc plays f4, then the knight on a3 is particularly misplaced. We hit him with d5, and after d3, d, queen d1, king d1, we have knight f6 when e4 pawn cannot even be protected. So after e5, white weakens all these light squares tremendously, and black's doing very well here. So take on f4 is just not a good combination with the knight on a3. 4 knight a3 is played. Now black got bishop d7 castle, and this is as though white played knight a3 in that major tabia, which is well, not the most ideal square for the knight, obviously. Here Boris played knight f6, bishop c6, took with the b pawn. Taking with the d pawn leads to another type of Rossolimo structures. Also, again, fine, of course, as knight on a3 is rather premature, especially with the a2 pawn not being on a4. But bc is the more ambitious option. After e5, black goes knight d5, rook e1 castle. Here, Jan Nepomniachtchi played d3. It was a little stronger to play knight c4. After f6 to go d4, try and fight for the central squares. But after cd, queen d4, bishop a6, black has two strong bishops and potential in the center thanks to this central pawns. Also pressure on the f-file. Black is definitely doing very fine. But after 9 d3, black was even more comfortable. Boris Gelfand played f6, and after knight c4, played a very strong move f takes e5, inviting one of the knights to e5. And after knight takes f takes e5, which was played by Nepo, Boris played queen c7, preparing d6 e5, and he got a strong pawn center next to his bishop pair and managed to win a very good game against Jan Nepomniachtchi. Knight a3, yeah, not a big issue for us. Bishop e2 is actually a very decent move. The idea is to go for the f4 setup, and after, let's say, knight c6, which is what I recommend, f4, d5. Here white plays d3, and now with the bishop on e2, the endgame after d is even less attractive for black, because after queen d1, white can take with the bishop on d1, and he keeps the right to castle. This, of course, must be playable, but white has a pretty comfortable endgame, so I prefer not to do that. And I faced this against Wei in the Grand Prix tournament in the rapid tiebreak. I reacted all right, but after the game, I found an even more harmonious setup, and the one I'd like to recommend, very smooth setup, that is to go e6 and bishop d6, knight g7, something we saw also in 2f4 line, but here it works very well as well. After knight f3, we go bishop d6, castle, and now knight g7. This bishop and knight, they brace very well for these central pawns. White cannot push the f pawn. If he pushes the e5 pawn, we drop the bishop back, and then we'll undermine the pawn center with f6. So let's see exactly how that happens. So e5 is 7e5 is one of the two moves. Also 7c3 first is possible. Let's look at e5. e5, bishop c7, c3, castle. Now d4 is actually possible. The point is that after cd, if white takes cd4, we will win a pawn already. After knight f5, we threaten knight takes d4 thanks to the bishop b6 tactic. And if white first plays, let's say, king h1, we will go bishop b6 and collect the d4 pawn. White, however, has a very strong intermezzo 10 bishop d3, and he's threatening bishop takes h7, followed by knight g5 and queen h5, which is very dangerous, simply a very serious threat. But we have move f6, which is anyway part of our plan. We'd like to bring the c8 bishop via d7 and e8 into the game, into this diagonal, where it will finally find a good job to do. And now after c takes d4, we can play bishop b6, pressuring the d4 pawn. And after ef6, take back with the rook. Taking back with the pawn is also possible. But here we can take with the rook, bishop e3, and play knight f5. We'd like to get the light squared bishop, and then later use ours to activate it via d7 and e8. As pretty much always in these positions. We'll play continues with bishop f5, rook f5, knight c3. Now we can play bishop d7 right away, or bishop c7 first, and hitting the f4 pawn. And after knight e5, bishop d7, followed by bishop e8. The bishop will get activated, and then white will definitely miss his light squared bishop. So a knight d4 not very dangerous. Knight a3 is a typical idea. First bring the knight to c2, then push d4. We play f6, d4. Once again, f6 is the typical idea. We undermine the pawn structure, but also open up the e8, h5 diagonal for the bishop. After d4, we can take. We play bishop d7. The bishop is heading towards h5. The other bishop will do a great job on b6. All in all, a very comfortable position for black. Excuse me. Knight c2. Knight is doing a fine job protecting the d4 pawn, and here we continue our plan of rerouting the bishop, bishop e8. And after bishop d3, we have already two options. We can either trade the bishop with bishop g6, or we can go for the more ambitious bishop h5, pinning the knight. And after ef, here we have to be a little accurate. Rook f6 is met by bishop h7, which is very, very unpleasant. Knight g5 followed by g4 in case of king g6. And after ef, we here have to take with the pawn, but we're doing quite well. After king h1, king h8, yeah, we control the center with our pawns, and we have the g file for the rook. Next, we want to play knight f5. The bishop on h5 is doing a great job. The bishop on c7 does so as well. Can also rejoin the attack on the d4 pawn via b6. All in all, a very comfortable position for black. You just have to know this f6, bishop d7, bishop e8 plan. A 7c3 is also possible. Now we can play f6, stop the option of e5, but we can also castle first. e5 will just transpose to what we had seen a moment ago. And if white doesn't push e5, he has two ways to develop, bishop e3 or knight a3. If bishop e3, we can also play f6, of course, but d4 works very well too. After bishop d2 back, we have b5, and we grab some space in the center and the queen side. And black had a good play in the game Yezhov against Shigalko in European Championship Rapid, Tallinn 2016. And yeah, it's very important that bishop on d6, knight on e7, they are like absorbing these central e4, f4 pawns. White doesn't have a clear plan here. E5 nor f5 are attractive. And here, on top of all that, knight on b1 is rather misplaced. 8 knight a3 is also possible. Now we play f6. We stop this move e5. It's a typical idea in this structure. It's a very good way of addressing these e4, f4 pawns. White doesn't really have a follow-up. Bishop e3 was played by Kovalyov against Moisenko in Riga Rapid 2019. Now black played b6, stopping knight b5. Not stopping knight b5, but taking the sting out of it, as now after knight b5, bishop b8, c5 pawn is protected, and white doesn't have much here. And Kovalyov played a4, trying to grab some space on the queen side. And after a6, knight a3, bishop b7, just developing the bishop. Queen e1 here. Moisenko allowed the b4 push with queen d7. Black was, of course, fine here as well. But I like the move bishop d6, stopping b4. And next we want to bring the queen out to d7 or c7, bring our a8 rook to e8. And also king h8 and knight g6 are amongst our useful moves. Whereas for white, it's really not clear what his follow-up is. He has this space with e4, f4 pawns, but it's not clear what to do with them. And in general, it's not really obvious what white should do. I really like the setup for black. I think black has a very comfortable position here. Next, I propose to look at the so-called Mora gambit, the d4 sacrifice. After cd, of course, taking on d4 with the queen would be not very logical compared to the open Sicilian. White loses time with the queen capture. He has to go back somewhere, and it's not clear why he's done it. The Mora gambit is c3. I'm really not so sure why in general all the fuss about the Mora gambit. First of all, we can play knight f6, and after e5, which seems to be the only sensible move, knight d5, we transpose into our Alapin repertoire, which is completely fine. But even better, I believe, is to just capture the pawn. D takes c3, knight c3, knight c6. White plays knight f3, e6, and bishop c4. This is their usual setup. And here, for some mysterious reason, black was usually advised to play on the queen side, develop the queen side with a6, b5, or bringing the queen to c7. But to me, it seems much more logical to first develop the king side, where it seems black is doing very fine. So I like the move bishop b4. Bishop c5 is also an option. I like bishop b4, more straightforward. Castle, now knight g7. Next we want to castle short, enjoy our extra pawn. I don't see any problems. There are three moves here that I looked at. The most popular is queen e2. Now we play castle. Rook d1, knight g6, one of the moves. The knight is well developed on g6, controlling the e5 square. White plays bishop g5, the most obvious. Now we go bishop e7. And after bishop e7, queen e7, black is doing very fine. After knight b5, going for the d6 square. Simple d5 equalizes very comfortably, but even more ambitious is to play with an extra pawn. Go for a6, knight d6, b5. And after bishop b3, develop this bishop via b7 with rook b8, intending bishop b7 followed by bishop a8. When the fact that white blocks the d7 pawn becomes sort of irrelevant, we play around the d6 knight, we will have developed all our pieces. And we just have an extra pawn. I believe this is very fine. And again, d5 was just a comfortable way of equalizing, so this is anyway not very challenging. 8 bishop g5 is another move. Now we castle, and after rook c1, I propose to first start with h6, and after bishop h6, bishop h4, easiest to just take on c3, bishop c3, and now after rook takes c3, push the pawn with d5, open at the center, and finish development quite smoothly. After e5, bishop b3, we go bishop e6. And white has quite some compensation for the pawn, but only enough to get good defensive drawing chances. After knight d4, for example, knight takes d4, bishop e7, queen d4, white is likely to hold here, bring a pawn down, but blockading our pawn very well. But this is not really an issue from our point of view. Of course, we are just playing here for two results. And finally, perhaps the easiest option for white to try and simplify is to go knight b5. And now white wants to gain control over the d6 square, but now we just play d5, and after ed, bishop d5, white does regain the pawn, but after knight d5, queen d5, and short castle, we have still the bishop pair, and yeah, we just get a free little advantage. So not really impressed with the Mora gambit. And finally, I think there are just two options left that I have prepared for you here, and these are two joke variations. So one joke variation is older than the other. You will see how the humor has evolved throughout the years. So Queen H5 was a move that Hikaru played in 2005, I believe, 15 years ago. And yeah, of course, a very provocative and a pretty silly move. The queen is exposed to a lot of potential attackers. Not very good, but yeah, as a joke, I think it does the job. So here I recommend e6. Hikaru played f4 here. Not really, not really impressed with that setup. Knight c6, c3, d5, d3 is how Hikaru played. This happened in Nakamura Karakin 2005. Both players were very young. Here Karakin played a sensible move g6, but even stronger is move knight f6, developing the knight. And after queen e2, black is of course fine regardless, but with white having wasted 2 tempi with the queen in the opening, I think it is just to punish him here with direct move e5 in the center. And if white tries to keep the position close with f5, we break down his pawn chain with c4 when dc is met by de, and yeah, ed, excuse me, is met by cd. So all in all, just a very good position. White has played far too provocatively and broke the rules of the opening. 3 knight f3 was our idea of rapport. Actually, it looks not so pointless. After knight f6, white gets the queen out to h4, but it's also not so great. You play knight c6. We don't have to fear the e5 push. After e5, knight d8, queen d8, you can take with the king. The endgame is very comfortable. We want to develop the c8, bishop to b7. If need be, we will undermine the e5 pawn with f6 and have a good central control. Yeah, we just have a very comfortable endgame here. And if bishop b5, which was played by Rapport against Vlasnichka, black here has a very strong resource. Also, an interesting alternative, by the way, the move g5. Very messy, very cool, but strong resources, knight e7. Knight is heading towards g6. The poor queen gets hit. And now the best white has is to try and run away with the queen to the other side with e5, knight g6, queen a4. But now after knight d5, we will keep hitting the queen with a6 followed by b5 and gaining so much tempi on this exposed queen. Black is doing very well, of course. So no reason to panic after queen h5. And now finally, you probably already know what we are about to see now. You probably just see it coming. Last and least, I finally decided to do it after doubting a little bit. Decided to follow the trend. They broke me. I'm going to look at the Boncloud King E2. Now, one thing I should say about Boncloud on a serious note, of course, it's a very terrible move, and the idea is usually to either provoke the opponent or sometimes it's played also with an intent to give a handicap. I played Boncloud on a stream against chess lovers, Indian comedians who were good friends of mine, and we had agreed to do so that they get some handicap. I managed actually to win that game. I played with the black pieces, so my Boncloud looked a little different. But yeah, other than that, the move, of course, is horrible, but you should be aware that it doesn't mean that you had already won the game or that you should win it automatically. You should still play a good game. You should still play well. And although black's advantage is overwhelming, you still need to convert it. And yeah, I think it's important to stay alert, not get overexcited. I give move knight c6, d3, and here there was a game between Hikaru and Wesley. Wesley played g6, of course, just like any other move. This was very good. Wesley got a very good position. But eventually he did lose, especially in blitz, of course. Things can definitely go wrong, especially with the psychological implications of this of this bone cloud business. But here I recommend an even stronger move, d5, and the funny nuance that I wanted to show that after ed, queen d5, knight c3. Now, usually I always say queen on d5 is not good when it can be hit by the knight, but here after queen e6 check, the king on e2 is so badly placed that white doesn't have a way to harmoniously guard it with bishop e2, or knight e2, which would be a thing if the king was on e1. But yeah, here the king on e2, of course, is overexposed, and the only move is bishop e3, when we can play g6, develop with knight h6, knight f5, bishop g7, if need be, play knight d4, and yeah, black is just doing very, very well here. But again, you have to play a good game, so please do so. I believe with that we concluded all the second move sidelines. If you have watched all of the series and this was the last chapter of the course, then congratulations, you have made it. Now you can start watching from the start all over again. But yeah, jokes aside, thank you for watching, and best of luck with the second move sidelines, but also in particular with all of the Najdorf. I hope you'll have a fun journey. So thank you for watching, and bye-bye.